Well, it's 10 o'clock in the morning here on Monday, March 17th, 2025, and it's warming up. So this morning I come out, had to wear my coat. The wind was blowing, it was like 50 degrees. Now it's kind of in the mid 60s, if not 70s. And the temperatures for the rest of March are going to be, 60s and 70s the whole way. I wanted to kind of walk down this row. This is the last row where the cattle are at. There's a couple things that I observed that were pretty interesting. I wanted to show you guys. But there's a couple other things on my mind too. Hold on, there's a short in the fence over here. Let's see if I can fix it. Greg Judy's video that he released today, he talked about a guy that doesn't want to do rotational grazing because he's lazy. And Greg Judy said, at least he's honest about it. Well, the truth is I'm lazy too. See, I didn't even want to turn off the fence. Fix that short. Anyway, I'm lazy too, and that's why I do rotational grazing. When you think about all the things you need to do, you need to know to do like conventional or I guess state-of-the-art cattle grazing, and the investments required, it's kind of ridiculous. But the reason why I got into rotational grazing is because the startup costs are way lower. I don't need a tractor. I don't need to drill seed into the ground. I just need a fence charger and some wire, some reels and posts, right? I don't need to know about vaccination schedules or what is it called? How to properly apply dewormer and what kind of feed to get for the cattle either. That's not really what we're about. Just the amount of stuff I don't need to know in order to do this and make it work is kind of ridiculous. Of course, some people are gonna laugh at me. But the issue is how do you take a guy who doesn't have any knowledge of cattle and make him productive on a piece of land? Or is it something that you have to have this generational transfer of knowledge, otherwise it's impossible? In other words, only certain people can ever hope to do it. So here's some of the hay. The cattle just aren't coming out here to eat this. Probably because they have everything they want up there. But anyway, so that's kind of point number one is I'm doing this because I'm lazy. More like the amount of effort required to get it working is a lot less than the other method. And I can get by being ignorant about certain things for a period of time. Now, eventually, I have to optimize some of the aspects of my operation, but this is good enough and it works. So there's things I can do better, like these manure patties are entirely too tall. I guess I need to give them some more protein supplement. I think I got 4 bags left. Probably just buy another 40. There's a good chance I might have to feed it to them in summer too. So here's some more of that hay that I rolled out yesterday. Anyway, that's kind of point number one, is I'm doing this because I'm lazy, right? This is less work. It requires less knowledge. It requires less investment. And one of the things that kind of inspired me was I think it was Greg Judy talked about getting the eye, where you start to, the more you look at it, the more you start to see things and find the patterns and things like that. And so one of the nice things about rotational grazing is you're constantly coming out to the field, looking at the cows, looking at the grass, and eventually it starts to click, right? And for me, that took about a year before I realized that cows need to eat grass, which sounds silly, but I had this idea that I can turn cattle onto a paddock that didn't have any grass at all, and somehow they'd magically be able to eat. Or, if I just put out the extra feed that they needed, that they'd make it work, but what was happening was I was overgrazing. And so there needs to be a certain amount of grass before you turn the animals onto the pasture on the paddock. I thought I heard the fence clicking over here. Yeah, let's go look. So that's one of the lessons I learned. The grass has got to be so high before the cows can eat it. And if it's not that height, you turn them onto it, they're just going to destroy it. I hear something, like, it could just be a leaf or something. Anyway, that's one of the lessons I learned. The other lesson is that rest and recovery, you can't be measured on a clock or a calendar. It's measured in the grass itself, right? So if you're grazing and there's not a lot of grass and the cows eat it down to the ground, you're destroying the grass. You got to leave the paddock with plenty of grass intact, you know, or at least the tips just nibbled off, you know what I mean? Grass doesn't like to be mowed down to the ground. It takes a long time to recover. Now, the total grazing folks, they're going to disagree with that, and that's fine. I think their strategy works. I'm more of the selective grazing or some compromise between the two. I'm not really sold on the total grazing technique yet. And I'll be honest, the technique I've been using has been working pretty dang good. You know, I have no complaints, right? So here we are in the middle of March. Red, you're bossy. Here we are in the middle of March. This is what I wanted to show you guys. So this is the paddock where the cows have been. They've been here since, I believe, Friday. Maybe Saturday. Probably Saturday. I got to double check when I moved them in here. I think it's Friday, actually. And you can see there's plenty of green. But when you get down and look at it closely, it's just not a lot of grass. You know. Now, this is the paddock they left. Let's go over there and take a look at what it looks like. Remember, the sheep were here for half a week, and then the cows were here for half a week. So this has been continuously grazed for a week by different species of animals. And it looks like it's been cleared out. It looks pretty similar. Now, you might notice that the green's a little bit darker color. It's a little bit darker color of green. But then I saw stuff like this. Look at that. They left that behind. That grass wasn't even touched. Right? There's some other places too that I was pretty excited about. So the grass is doing just fine. And I think the cattle like to focus more on the hay. It's just easier eating, especially when the grass is short like this. So this is just fine. A couple other thoughts. Number one, let's see where we at in the time. I have to wait a couple more minutes before I can talk about this topic, so I will delay that. In between topics, the fly scenario, fly situation. This is I'm surprised I don't have more flies right now. I really am. There's like 20 flies on her. She is so fat. That's number 10, my half Brahman, half Angus. Brownie's got like two flies. So there's a spot on her belly. I think that's just somebody licked her, right? But yeah, the flies are starting to pop out. I expected more flies. Fly control. How do you control flies? Well, you can use chemicals. That doesn't really work that well, I'll be honest. And the chemical arms race against the insects and the bugs and things, it's a losing scenario. You can't win. You might get a temporary victory here and there, but the way nature works is it finds a way around it. And to be honest, I think flies actually do something useful. I'm not really sure what it is they do, but they do something useful. So what I'm relying on is healthy soil that can take these patties and absorb them. What I'd want to see is a bunch of beetles, dung beetles. Let's see if she's... Iron manure's not that bad. Anyway, I want to see a bunch of dung beetles come out here and just suck the liquid out of the patties, so that when the flies lay their eggs and the larvae hatch, the eggs hatch, the flies, they basically die because they don't have the moisture they need in that patty. And the dung beetles will also take the patty and move it downstairs, you know, where the flies really can't get to it. But so that's kind of the fly control strategy. Now those dung beetles they're pretty sensitive creatures, and because they're digging around in that dung patty, if we put chemicals in there designed to kill flies, it could affect the dung beetles too, right? And as far as I know, none of these fly control chemicals that I see on the shelves at the feed store, none of them say it doesn't harm dung beetles. I don't even think they know what a dung beetle is, you know. When it warms up a little bit more, I expect to see a bunch of dung beetles. I'll see other kinds of animals too. Last year I saw golden, what are they called? Golden dung flies or something like that, yellow dung flies. That was down by that tree in the middle of the pasture. But those flies, what they do is they actually lay their eggs inside of the fly larvae and the fly eggs. And so they're a predatory species that will predate on the horn flies and keep the horn fly population in check. Now I put out here for several years, I put out the wasps. There were they're fly killing wasps basically. They lay their eggs inside of the fly eggs and larvae and stuff like that, and so they keep the population in check too. I'll be honest, I haven't really seen much success from those. I don't know if it's made a big difference because I don't even know if I'm applying it right. You know, I'm not going to do it this year just to kind of see what happens. But you know, all in all, I really can't complain that much. The fly population that I've seen wasn't that much greater than my neighbors. You know what I mean? So rotating, moving the cows. That's really big for keeping the fly population in check too, because those flies take a while to hatch and to start flying around. And if your cattle are like, 1,000 feet away, there's a good chance the horn flies won't even find them, or very few will find them, right? And so the horn flies, they hatch and they start poking around looking for animals, and they can't find any because their animals are gone. That's another reason why I want to do like the leader follower type system, is to keep, I don't want the cow flies predating on the sheeps and the sheep fly predating on the cows, right? So, all right, you ready for this? Okay, so there is, it's coming to light now, and this is a big deal. As Lee Zeldin, as the EPA chief, starts digging through the fraud and the scams that they've been running at the EPA. First of all, carbon dioxide is not, never was, never can be a poison, right? Carbon dioxide is part of the carbon cycle. It's an essential part. If you take carbon dioxide off the earth, everything dies. Okay. Now, we don't know exactly what the carbon levels were in the past, but according to the different techniques we have available to us to try to determine that, carbon dioxide levels in the past were much higher. So today, carbon dioxide levels are lower than they've been geologically speaking, right? So we're talking over thousands of years, stuff like that, right? Why that is, we're not really sure. There is some suggestion that carbon dioxide levels seem to follow the global temperature levels. However, I'm going to say a couple caveats there. Number one, the idea of a global temperature, or like global highs or average temperature, is nonsense. It has no physical significance. The Earth does have a temperature. When you consider the Earth as part of a system of like space, the sun, the Earth, there is an actual temperature that can be measured. But that's not the average temperature. And I'm going to explain to you very quickly why average temperature means nothing. Let's say I wanted to find out what the temperature of the kitchen was. So I stuck a thermometer in a pot of boiling water and then another thermometer in a freezer. I added those two temperatures together, divided by 2. Is that the temperature of the kitchen? No, and that's ridiculous to think it ever could be. Right? It doesn't matter if you use one thermometer or 1,000 thermometers. Average temperature means nothing. There's no physical significance for that value. Temperature itself is a very well-defined quantity that describes the how energy moves from one system to another, and the temperature reflects the how the entropy will change if energy were to transfer into that system, right? And entropy is a complicated concept, but it's really not that complicated. Suffice it to say that temperature is a well understood concept. Average temperature doesn't mean anything. And you don't calculate temperature by taking a bunch of temperature measurements and averaging them. There's a different process for measuring temperature, okay? All right, that's number one. Number two, carbon dioxide doesn't affect the global temperature. There is no relationship. There never has been. Periods where the global temperature was high, carbon dioxide were relatively low, and vice versa, right? So we know exactly what the effect of carbon dioxide is on temperature. We can calculate it, and you can look it up in a material science data book, what the temperature conductivity of carbon dioxide is. You can compare that with nitrogen and oxygen and everything else, right? And you're gonna find that it's pretty dang similar, right? Now, given that carbon dioxide is a trace gas, meaning that there's only a tiny amount of it in the atmosphere, if you were to double or triple or quadruple the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it would have no effect whatsoever. Because, first of all, carbon dioxide behaves like all the other gases. Water is an exception because of its shape, but it's not that big of an exception. But also because there's so little carbon dioxide, doubling or tripling it doesn't really mean anything, right? It's like if I had a pot of coffee and I put in a drop of cream versus 2 drops of cream. It doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't mean anything. So anyway, temperature, carbon dioxide. What he's going to find very soon is that the global climate scam was designed to transfer money from industry to politicians, okay? The scientists were cherry-picked. The data was cherry-picked. They've ignored tons and tons of data that contradict our findings. Most recently, I read an article. I'm not going to share the article. But the gist of the article was this, is that this person went through and tried to quantize the effect of rising carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. And he also quantized the economic effects of what increased temperature would do. And what he found was that the IPCC report that comes out of the UN that says we're all going to die was fabricated because they ignored significant parts of the economy. For instance, if the global temperature were to rise by 9 degrees Fahrenheit, what is that, like 5 degrees centigrade, okay, then the likely effect is that crop production and crop yields would be increased dramatically. This would bring down the cost of food and the cost of farming. And there'd be a tremendous savings for everybody across the world if the global temperature were to rise a few degrees, okay? Now, thought experiment, why do you think rising the temperature slightly would affect agriculture very positively? And the answer is nobody farms in winter, right? If you were to shorten the winter, or if you were to make the winter more mild, if you were to lengthen the summer, make the summer a little bit more intense, we would have more crops, right? Plants need sunlight, they need heat, they need temperature. They also need water and carbon dioxide. Furthermore, increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere would have a tremendous boon to agriculture, making it so much easier to farm and farm productively all across the world, not just in highly developed nations like ours, right? So the net effect of increasing temperatures and increasing carbon dioxide on the world would be extremely positive for everybody. Starvation would go down, lifespans would increase, economic productivity would increase. It is not going to hurt the economy. It's going to make us better. If it were possible that we could increase carbon dioxide, we should. Okay? If it were possible that we should, right? However, There's a tremendous amount of science saying that it doesn't matter what we do, it doesn't change the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere. Okay? There are other factors at play that release way more amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere or sink way more massive amounts of carbon dioxide. And we have nothing to do with those processes, right? Now, my hope is that by increasing the fertility of my pasture, by growing more plants, maybe I'll help, increase carbon dioxide. Probably it might reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere very slightly. We're talking like, I don't know if you could even measure the difference, like maybe one molecule in a cubic meter of gas would increase or decrease because of my activity on this farm here in 60 acres, right? Maybe. No, probably not a cubic meter, probably a cubic kilometer. Just a huge amount of gas and a very tiny amount of change, right? But my proposal is that we should not be moving away from oil and gas. We should, if anything, be using more coal, oil, and gas. And we should be burning as much of that so-called fossil fuels to produce energy cheaply, safely, efficiently, and releasing that carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is a good thing, right? And I think that if we could increase the carbon dioxide, we should again. If we could, we should. If we could raise temperatures, we should, okay? Now, if you are steeped in the climate change cult, okay, what I'm telling you sounds like heresy, but that's what the science says. That's what the science says. If you go down and look at the science and you're not biased and you're looking at all the different things and you're looking carefully at what actually happens, you'll come to the same conclusion. This is also one of the reasons why physicists like myself, people who studied physics like myself, I shouldn't call myself a physicist, I haven't worked in the physics industry, except when I was in college. So we pretty much unanimously agree. I mean, I can't think of, there's probably a few people out there that have a physics degree or are in the physics industry. Probably, maybe 10% at most. But the vast majority of us all agree that nuclear energy is fantastic, wonderful stuff, and we should be doing more of that. One of the founders of Greenpeace looked at the data and absolutely agrees that if we were to make as much nuclear energy as possible, it would have a tremendous beneficial effect, not just on the environment, but on the economy as well, right? And we've been saying this for 50 years now, but who listens to a physicist? Don't worry about it. We're used to watching people make stupid mistakes. We'll be there to help you clean up. But carbon dioxide is not bad for you. Carbon dioxide is not increasing the temperature, but increased temperatures and increased carbon dioxide will be a good thing for this planet. Guys, have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.